Secret agendas, real or imagined, are increasingly showing up on the mainstream radar. The internet is jam-packed with conspiracy theories. One, that a superhighway from Mexico to Manitoba is being planned, massive in scale, 4 football fields wide. The reason? To put trade into overdrive. That theory reaching the highest levels of government at the summit in Montebello yesterday. And as Jacques Bourbeau tells us, officials making the point today that rumors like that need to be left by the roadside.
New efforts tonight to find a plan by some corporate business leaders.
Despite denial after denial, the story that Canada, the U.S. and Mexico are planning to build a NAFTA superhighway is getting an awful lot of airtime. Critics say when North American leaders get together to talk about the Security and Prosperity Partnership, or SPP, behind closed doors they're hatching plans for superhighways, common currencies, customs unions. All 3 governments insist these are myths. Still, they're now being voiced as legitimate questions by reporters.
Are there plans to build some kind of superhighway connecting all 3 countries?
Back to our top story now, Montebello, Quebec, where Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper is hosting the presidents of the United States and Mexico, part of what's called the Security and Prosperity Partnership. But if the protests are any indication, the process also has a lot of critics. So how does that process work? What is its focus? Who's a part of the dialogue and who's not? Here now is the CBC's Joan Leishman with Security and Prosperity.
Linamar Corporation, based in Guelph, Ontario, is a powerhouse. It has 37 auto parts plants, generating about $2 billion a year. The kind of success that's made CEO Linda Hasenfratz one of the chosen few to advise the leaders in Montebello.
I think that for our company, the border area is the most important. We do a great deal of business in the U.S. and in Mexico, so being able to cross those borders a little more easily with a little more streamlined paperwork and less of a wait time is going to be very beneficial for us.
We're pretty proud of our gear grinding capability, which is really leading-edge technology in North America.
Hasenfratz is one of 30 business leaders from Canada, the United States and Mexico invited to the talks. They'll report directly to the Prime Minister and to presidents on how to strengthen business and harmonize trade regulations.
Regulation asks for certain information to be provided by the Canadian government, by the U.S. government, by the Mexican government. If we can simplify those processes and make them more seamless, then we only have to fill out one set of paperwork, for instance, and fill out that paperwork electronically to simplify and make sure everybody's getting the information, because really it's all the same information that everybody's looking for when you go to cross borders, whether with goods or with people.
Steve, we also just heard from Paul Churchill that he does expect the dollar to continue to weaken into Christmas from against the euro. Do you think that momentum will impact any other asset classes?
Well, I'll tell you, take a look at the
This isn't the first time the leaders of the 3 countries have gathered to promote North American security and prosperity. 3 years ago, George Bush hosted the first summit near his ranch in Texas. At that time, it was Prime Minister Paul Martin and President Vicente Fox of Mexico. It was clear then, in the wake of 9/11, the way we do business was going to change.
And so we had a good discussion about prosperity and security. It turns out the 2 go hand in hand.
As President Bush tightened security, moving toward what many called Fortress America, all the leaders watched the rising tigers to the east.
New economic powerhouses such as China and India are rising, and we face new opportunities, but we also face new challenges. Thank you all for coming.
Martin called the new Security and Prosperity Partnership a roadmap for continental success and global competition. Others called it a much-needed extension of the free trade agreement. Last year's meeting was in Mexico, where Vicente Fox showed off some of his country's cultural icons. There was a new member of the Three Amigos, Stephen Harper.
We are living today in an integrated economy. We cannot afford the politics of isolation.
The other striking difference about the Cancun summit was the presence of some of the richest and most powerful men and women on the continent, leaders of international blockbusters like Walmart, Home Depot, Lockheed Martin, and Canada's Power Corporation.
President, GM Canada, Vice President, General Motors Corporation.
Good morning, Dave O'Reilly, CEO, Chevron Corporation.
Rick Wall, President, Chief Executive, Scotiabank.
I want to thank the CEOs and the business leaders from the three countries who are here. I thought we had a very constructive discussion about ways to make sure that there's harmonization between our industries so that the people benefit.
The Security and Prosperity Partnership has 19 working groups looking at hugely diverse areas. Under security, coming up with the equivalent biometric standards for passports, visas, and resident cards for all three countries. Sharing terrorist watch lists. Cooperating in the detention and removal of illegal migrants. Under prosperity, finding compatible standards for cars and auto parts. Further development of the tar sands, and coming up with common food safety standards.
Metals then taken off to the upside on the back of this dollar drop. We're coming into a cyclical bottom for gold, and it rises going into December, January, so that might be the reverse of the dollar fall. Apart from that, I think one thing people who are dollar-based need to focus on is the Amero. That's the one thing that nobody's talking about that I think is going to have a big impact on everybody's life in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. If you Google it, you'll find out all about it.
Well, you could tell us a little bit more right now.
You always hear it on CNBC. The Amero is the proposed new currency for the North American community, which is being developed right now between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico to make a borderless community, much like the EU, and the dollar, Canadian dollar, U.S. dollar, and the Mexican peso replaced by the Amero.
You really think that will get any leeway?
You may want to visit a couple of websites and see how far along it is. The Canadians are pretty upset about it, whereas the Americans, apart from the Texans, are the only people who know anything about it. The rest of the public's really sort of with their head in the sand on this one.
Okay, interesting. I mean, we've already got NAFTA, the free trade zone, isn't? I mean, is that working? Is that doing enough?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's created a lot of illegal immigrants come across the border. I don't know. You get the pros and cons on this thing. NAFTA, for some people, is a very good thing. For other people, it's been a disaster. And I think this is one way that the politicians are trying to work themselves out of what potentially could be a disastrous situation going forward.
Critics of the SPP say all kinds of groups have been shut out of the process. Protests seem to be the only way to get their voices heard. In their final communique, the leaders seem to acknowledge this. We ask that our ministers continue to seek input from interested parties in determining future priorities.
We'll see in the year ahead if they're true to their word, and if so, I really do think that will help to dampen some of the concerns and some of the wild stories that we heard surrounding the summit this year.
The one group that does get a table at the SPP meetings is business leaders, and critics say this has to change.
It's very clear that the response from the Canadian people and from the American people and just the criticisms have stung. And now they're saying the process is dead unless it starts to take on a more democratic air.
If that doesn't happen, leaders could find themselves answering more questions about NAFTA superhighways at their next summit. Jean Perbeau, Global News, Ottawa. At their final news conference, the three leaders did their best to dispel some of these fears about the SPP. But Ambassador Wilkins admits more needs to be done.
And I think we all need to do a better job. Sometimes when you don't fill a void, it's filled with myths and innuendos and conspiracy.